Hello, I am Rico Cavella, and this is your Ageless Body Self-Care Guide, your operations manual for your body and for your mind. And the title of today's session is How to Build a Powerful Immune System. And of course, now with this COVID-19 virus going around, we know that the very best defense you have is to have a strong immune system. So this is so important. And we have a great expert and trainer today. Her name is Dr. Sally Lamont. She is a naturopathic doctor and an acupuncturist with over 30 years of experience in functional medicine. She specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of a range of digestive problems, thyroid, adrenal, and female hormonal imbalances, brain fog, and early dementia, and other chronic diseases. So, Dr. Lamont, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Rico. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for bringing your wisdom and knowledge with us today. So let's just get right into it. So tell us, I think it's always a good way to start out to let people really know what we're talking about. So what exactly is our immune system and what does it do for us?
Well, I like to have people think of their immune system as their personal internal defense team that is working 24/7 to protect them from foreign invaders. And as you know, there are many of those things, and the timely one that has all of our attention is COVID-19, of course. I think it's helpful to think of your body as your country and your immune system as your country's military. Now, I came from a father who was a World War II vet, but I wasn't in the military, and it's not an analogy I use often, but I think it's a really good one because the immune system is our defense system, and scattered around our land of our body is a complex network of defenders. We have tissues and glands and specialized cells and the chemical messengers that they make that work as a team to protect us from a range of foreign invaders, viruses, bacteria, protozoa, worms, parasites, pollens, toxins, allergens, you know? So the immune system has kind of three branches. And the first is the protective barriers that our body has built in. And then the next phase is the innate, and then the adaptive immune system. And I want to tell you about each because they each play a vital role, and a role that we can support. You know, we are not just passive recipients to everything that happens to us. The way we eat and live has a profound effect on the efficiency of the immune system. So we'll talk about that.
And think as well, and think too, right?
Thank you. So glad you brought that up. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like worry and stress to drag down the system. So let's start by talking about the protective barriers real quick. It starts with the skin. And if you think about the skin like a fortress around your home, it's the first line of defense for keeping invaders out. And, you know, it's really beautifully designed to keep moisture out, the sun rays from burning us, the endless array of germs and toxins from coming in. But what we don't think about is our inner skin, the respiratory tract and the digestive tract comprises a mucosal surface area, kind of like the inside of your cheek. That's a mucous membrane. And lining our respiratory tract and our gut, the inner tube, is a very dynamic barrier that is, it can be strong and keep things out, or sometimes it can fall prey to what we call intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut, and then act more like a sieve and actually become a vector for viruses to enter our body and other microorganisms. So these mucosal surfaces are really the front line of the battle, the border between our inner and outer worlds. And maintaining the health of these borders is really important. We want to protect against leaky gut. So The next branch of the immune system that I think we should touch on is the innate immune system.
Mm.
Now, the innate immune system is one that is, I think of as kind of inborn. It's there from the beginning, and it includes a squad of white blood cells and lymphocytes and macrophages and monocytes and neutrophils, the kinds of white blood cells that act like Pac-Man to come and bind and then destroy organisms. The innate immune system comes out of the bone marrow, and you can kind of think of the bone marrow as boot camp, the training place for the white blood cells and the rest of our immune cells of the innate immune system. That's where they get their basic training, and they actually learn what to do when they go out there and encounter these microorganisms. Now, this is good to have from the beginning because it's fast. So even as a child, if we cut our skin, these white blood cells and all of the other supportive cells will be there in split seconds to control infection. But it isn't a very specific means of protection. So we have another layer of the immune system called the adaptive or the acquired immune system. And this branch of the immune system is slower to ramp up because it's learning, it's acquiring information from the innate immune system and from the organisms it meets. But what it does that is so important to protect us is it is very specific. So the adaptive immune system has two branches, and those are the T cells and the B cells. And I'm just going to mention them. You know, you don't have to understand this. You just have to recognize that you actually have a very powerful force that is protecting you. So you don't have to tell your T cells and B cells what to do. They know. They are amazing little critters that are kind of like the generals and the special op forces because they've gotten specialized training. The T cells come out of the bone marrow and then they go to the thymus gland, a gland that is right under our sternum. And that's where they learn to target and destroy and actually remember their enemies. And they generate a whole fleet of things like cytotoxic, which means cell killing. There are cytotoxic T cells. There are T regulatory cells, T helper cells, and T memory cells. And T memory cells, they act in a way like an antibody, but different to remember an organism. But it's the B cells that are trained in the bone marrow, and hence the name B cells. And they are the antibody producing cells. Viruses, bacteria, even pollens and allergens carry a protein on their surface, which we call an antigen. And the B cells are capable of making an antibody to exactly match the antigen on the surface of the invader, kind of like a key that fits perfectly into a lock. And once the antigen and antibody form a complex, they are targeted for elimination and destruction. So that's kind of an overview of the immune system, the innate, adaptive, and the barriers. And they work together to protect us from a range of foreign invaders.
Wow, that was quite an explanation. That was so good, Sally. I really love your analogy of your body as your what did you say? I forget. I'm sorry, I forgot what you said. But your body, your immune system is like your protective system for your entire body, and your whole analogy was so good, and your T cells and all this and boot camp, and that was so good. I think that was really clear, and people got a really good idea of what our immune system is, and it's such a complex system, isn't it? It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It's extraordinarily complex, and partly because it isn't like, you know, the other organism or organ systems, which are kind of clustered around a particular organ, the brain, or even the gut. Even though it's immense, it's in a tube that's flowing through us. The immune system is scattered all around, from your tonsils to your lymph nodes to the spleen and the thymus, and systemically. And the blood cells that are out there patrolling our bodies 24/7, looking for the bad guys so they can keep us well, but they also know how to tolerate the good guys. You know, in our gut, we have large intestine specifically, something like 70 trillion microorganisms. So just another family of down there that we have a symbiotic relationship with. And the immune system is smart enough to know when there's some bad guys down there, but leave the good guys alone. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, well, so well described. So why do you think so many people these days have a compromised immune system?
Well, that is a really great question. And I think the answer, once I share it, will kind of become apparent. You know, over the last 50 years, the rates of chronic disease in America have skyrocketed. And not just in America, but around the world. Chronic conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, obesity. You put these guys together and you have a chronic disease epidemic that's resulting in increased heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer, dementia, chronic lung and pulmonary problems. It really has to do with the food we eat. And when those conditions of high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high blood cholesterol, and being overweight come together, they form a condition called metabolic syndrome. And this occurs in over 30% of Americans, and it's projected that up to a quarter of the world's population has metabolic syndrome. And what's really bad about it is it creates a state of chronic inflammation. And that chronic inflammation impairs our immune system, and it predisposes us to the worst outcomes of COVID-19 and many other things. It's why the people that go into the hospital and can't get back out, they are almost always chronically inflamed. And there is one of those underlying health conditions. In fact, our CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control, which a lot of Americans didn't know about before COVID-19, and now the CDC just rolls right off your tongue. But the CDC says that 6 in 10 Americans have one of those chronic diseases, and 40% of us have 2 or more. So I just think it's really interesting how the chronic disease burden overlaps with metabolic syndrome to really produce the worst outcomes in COVID-19. It really is about the way we eat and the way we live.
Yeah, we know it's lifestyle. You know, we live in such a rush society. Everybody's stressed and rushing around and not getting enough sleep and eating processed foods and not exercising properly. All the things that we know that are good for your health, those are the things that are, I think, as you said, are compromising our immune system. And when you say it's true that, I mean, there's so many pathogens and toxins around in the air and in our building materials and our foods, that if we didn't have a strong immune system, we'd be sick all the time, right? But as long as you have a strong immune system, you don't get sick.
You certainly have a much better chance of protecting yourself from all these different pathogens. Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, sometimes people don't want to hear it's their lifestyle and that they have to make some switches, but it's just so important for every aspect of your health. You know, is you're in control. As you mentioned, okay, I got it before you. Your body's like your country, and your immune system is like the army that protects the country.
Amen.
Well, then would you say that your mind or your mindset, who you are in your thinking, that would be like the commander in chief, you know? So you have control over how you're taking care of your army, right?
Yes, you do. Yeah. You know, it does require some discipline because we've developed some bad habits in our country.
Yeah.
And the modern life.
More than some.
Yeah. I think of it's really kind of modern life. We've made it so that we don't have to work like people did 100, 200 years before, and always before that, just to put food on the table, just to survive. So, yeah.
Okay, so tell us, so now, if someone comes to you and you know, and they say, you know, they know they have a compromised immune system, how would you get them started? What are the, and for our viewers, what can they do immediately? What are the main things that you say that they have to get started on that'll make a huge difference for them?
Well, I think that the most important thing that we can do is change our diet with the goal of lowering inflammation. And I want to talk just a little bit about inflammation and then how to lower it, okay?
Sure.
So inflammation is the fire at the core of chronic disease. Now, acute inflammation is a natural thing. If we get cut, we want our immune system to go to work immediately to send in that army of white blood cells and to attempt to clot the blood and bring on those kind of classic symptoms of inflammation: heat, pain, redness, and swelling. In the short run, that's good, and the body knows how to turn those things off. The challenge is when inflammation becomes chronic, then it becomes destructive. Then what we call the inflammatory cytokines, these chemical messengers that the immune system makes, kind of create a smoldering fire. And if that's in the background and you meet a virus like COVID-19, or the SARS coronavirus 2, or you even get the flu, the underlying inflammation is what makes for the worst outcomes. So the thing that we need to do to really put out the fires of chronic disease is get off of the blood sugar roller coaster. Sugar is a pro-inflammatory compound. Now, the problem is not the flavor sweet. Sweet's one of the natural flavors. We wouldn't have even survived if we couldn't discern sweet, because it allowed us to know what fruits were safe to eat and what were poisonous. The problem, as you know so well, Rico, is that over time, big agriculture has begun to subsidize corn, from which high fructose corn syrup is made, and lots of crops for the refined and processed food industry. And so people have a constant intake of high levels of sugar, which itself is pro-inflammatory. It causes the release of high levels of insulin, which is pro-inflammatory. All that sugar that the body can't really deal with ends up being stored as fat. And we used to think that the fat that we carried was just this benign stuff, you know, kind of good in case we ever starved to death. But it turns out that fat is actually a living substance, and it is generating a lot of those pro-inflammatory cytokines. So we really have to start to shift our diet to get away from the, you know, sugar in the morning, sugar at lunch, dinner, before bed is the worst thing that you can do. So I'll control myself because I could go off.
Yeah, we could go off on that. Okay, so number one thing would be really to reduce sugar and really get a handle on eating a much healthier diet and eat a diet of mostly whole organic foods and get rid of all the processed foods.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of, I'm going to call it a modified Mediterranean diet. You know, the Mediterranean diet has been proven to help slash the rate of heart disease and diabetes and obesity. It lowers inflammation. A Mediterranean diet is a plant-based diet that has a lot of fruits and vegetables, at least 7 servings a day, but they have cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, really full of phytochemicals, plant-derived chemicals that are good for us. They have fish in their diet. They use a little lean red meat. They use chicken. They have a little dairy, but they don't go crazy with it like we do in our country. They don't sit down to a 16-ounce steak. They might have a little pancetta and some sauteed greens. So they really do limit the consumption, though, of large quantities of red meat, of refined and processed foods, and sugar. And I say modified Mediterranean. I want to just put a little addendum to that. Modified because the way I think that we should do it here in America is we should not be eating a lot of wheat. In fact, I think most of us would be better off being gluten-free. Gluten, and as your listeners probably know, is and its evil cousin gliadin. Gluten and gliadin are the proteins that are in the wheat grain. Ancient wheat had very little gluten and gliadin in it, but because it's the gummy stuff that makes bread kneadable, and then we can turn it into, you know, cake and cake art for the Food Channel. I mean, we've just hybridized wheat to the point that it's super high in gluten, and that gluten is an irritant to the inner skin. It actually allows for the process of intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut to ensue. So each time we have wheat, we have a transient rise in intestinal permeability. And for people who are having it 3 times a day and snacks, they're kind of in a constant state of immune influx, all these invaders getting across that gut lining. So that's how I would modify the Mediterranean diet. I would just cut back on the intake of wheat, but still use small amounts of other grains. They deliver a sense of satisfaction and some vitamins and minerals that are not as easy to get in other ways.
Okay, so that's number one is diet. Got to get a handle on your diet. So what are a couple more things kind of briefly that people need to really start doing right now to really improve the health of their immune system?
I think we need to take sleep seriously. We tend to go, and the last thing we want to do, apparently, from what I hear from my patients, is go to sleep. It's easy to stay up after the kids go to bed or till midnight or a little bit later for some quiet time. But the body goes into repair mode. The immune system goes into repair mode. And so it's not as surveillant at night. It is in its restoration phase. And so we're actually a little bit more vulnerable. And if we're up all night, it really wrecks the situation. And we've got to get the blue lights from all of the LEDs around us dialed off at least an hour before we go to bed, because the blue light turns down the pineal gland's production of melatonin. And melatonin is more than just that thing you take when you want to try to go to sleep. It turns out that melatonin really is incredibly immune supportive. And studies have been done demonstrating the ability of melatonin to help raise the natural killer cells and other kinds of white blood cells and lymphocytes to fight viral infections. So I'm a big fan of having people respect the laws of nature here. And as the sun starts to set, start to ramp down. If you can't do that, a little melatonin, and it doesn't take much, you know, a half of a milligram to maybe 3 is all that is needed a few hours before bed to remind your body that night is coming and it's time to rest. Beyond that, exercise, and you're the king of exercise here, so I know that that has been touched on. Connecting, really connecting with a community and connecting to source, having a connection to ourself. I think sometimes, particularly before COVID-19 hit, we were so outwardly extended that we really didn't take time to come inside and breathe, rest, find a place of peace. But as we suffer from a degree of social isolation, I wanted to leave your viewers with the idea of connecting to their community and their friends, and to get into the kitchen and cook together.
Yeah.
So that's something you can do on a Zoom call. You could, you know, get a friend to bring in food, and you could both cook something and eat it together. Or if an older person who's infirmed and unable to really get out and cook for themselves, bring something to them, or cook in their home, or bring them a beautiful meal. It's a way of extending love. It's a way of nourishing body, mind, and spirit.
That's so well said, Sally. Thank you so much for that. I just want to say too, I know you have a website, Sally's Kitchen. You might want to check that out, sallyskitchen.com, where you show some healthy cooking on there. So that could be really helpful for people as well. And I want to remind all of our viewers that in addition to this video training, you have a PDF that comes with your package. And in that PDF, you have all the information of how you can contact Dr. Sally to learn more from her. And I know she just has come out with a new ebook all about the immune system, more in-depth information for you. So you definitely want to go and check that out. And also, if you want to learn more from her, so you can, so all her contact information and any gifts or special offers that all of our experts have are in the PDF. So be sure and check that out as well. So Dr. Sally, that was so good. I really appreciate it. I thank you so much. But I always like to ask one more question to my experts and say, I always like to tell people, knowledge without action is useless, right? So, so what ideas do you have? Maybe one big idea that maybe can really motivate people to actually take action on your recommendations.
That's an interesting one. Remember back to the very beginning of my talk, that inside of your body, you have a very powerful immune system that is protecting you. And that's just one of so many other organ systems that are working on your behalf to constantly keep you in a state of balance. How you eat and live really influences that. So I want to invite you to extend love to yourself, to take a few minutes each day to appreciate your body no matter what shape it is in, and keep extending it love and kindness so that judgment is replaced by compassion. And with a compassionate perspective, you're much more likely to act on some of the good information that you're getting in this summit.
That is so good. That's so good, Sally. And that's exactly what this whole project is about self-care and self-love for your body and for your mind and for your life. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Sally. That was so good. So again, the whole concept is you got the knowledge. Now you've got some good inspiration, some good knowledge. So step up and take some action on and get started. Get started right now. Thanks for watching.